Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sasquatch Out of the Shadows Live. As always, I'm your host, Alex Pedikov. I hope everyone's having a good Monday so far. We are kind of got a lot going on, so my mind is all over the place. I'm trying to keep it all together here. No, but I'm kidding. We're gonna have a good time tonight. Good conversation as always. If you haven't seen previous episodes, this is now stream 87. So yeah, we're getting up there in numbers, which is pretty cool. A couple of announcements here. This will be kind of one of the, I don't want to say last shows here, but we're going to be taking a little break after tonight's show just for a few weeks. Got some stuff going on. I'm sure you guys will find out all about it. Don't worry. We'll post other live stream videos regarding it, but we won't be doing this Monday night show. Carrick might be jumping on doing a show or two. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about that. I just kind of announced that. We'll see if he's okay with that. So we'll probably have Carrick St. Laurent on at some point. Good friend of the show, does a lot of the guest co-hosting shows, which is a lot of fun. We obviously appreciate what Carrick does. He's got a new documentary out on his channel, Crash Course Cryptozoology. So go check that out about mountain lions. Really fun. But so last week we had a fantastic conversation. I can't speak tonight. We had a great conversation with Shelley Covington, Montana. It was really fascinating. I love to hear about her kind of skeptical approach to a lot of the research, something I think we obviously need more of. It was just a great time. We've had a lot of fun shows in the past few weeks as well. So if you guys want to check it out, there's a playlist on the channel. In the playlist section, got all of the episodes, so you can see a lot of the old ones, a lot of the new ones. It's come a long way. So I think we're in a better spot than we were, 2 years ago, wherever it was that I started doing the show. So with that being said, let's talk about tonight's guest. So I'm going to be joined tonight by Emily Fleur of the Forest Fleur, and we'll talk about what that all means in a little bit here. But this is sort of, in Emily's own words here, quote, "For the past 5 years, I've been studying Sasquatch, an unrecognized species that inhabits not only the forests of North America, but the entire world. As a young girl, I visited Whitehall, the Sasquatch capital of New York." Very fun place. That was me inserting in the quote there. Back to the quote. "There I began my research into the mystery surrounding this undiscovered species. After speaking with a knowledgeable curator, I was able to take home a unique souvenir from the local museum. This experience would later inspire me to create a place where research and products meet. I know these animals exist, and my goal is to study them in the field. So please join me as I study the science behind Sasquatch, its potential origins, and the unique behavior of this unrecognized mammal." So without further ado, let's just bring Emily right in. What is going on?
Great to be here, Alex.
Absolutely. Appreciate having you on there. Obviously, quite a bit there from your bio, very ambitious, really excited to talk about it all. But let's just start from the basics. What got you interested in the Bigfoot topic originally? I mean, a lot of people get into it for different reasons, but what was that? Do you remember a defining moment, or was there something in particular that kind of drew you to it?
Absolutely. It's funny enough, the thing that drew me into the Bigfoot subject was a documentary by Ivan Marks. It's The Legend of Bigfoot. And unfortunately, Ivan Marks was a bit of a hoaxer.
Right.
So it's pretty ironic that that's what got me into this subject. And I'm so against all of the hoaxing stuff. Sure. But I saw this documentary as a young girl, and I just was totally drawn in. And I kind of knew that, watching the film, the Bigfoots in the film weren't real, but I kind of thought to myself, could there be more to this legend? My mom and I would watch Monster Quest and shows like that. And then eventually Small Town Monsters came out with The Beast of Whitehall, and Finding Bigfoot came out. And I just grew up watching these shows, and these people became my heroes. I was just drawn to the subject. And when I got to college, I was doing all of my research reports on Bigfoot and the Yeti. I was just totally enamored with the subject. And so I asked my parents, can we take a family trip up to Whitehall, New York? I was growing up right outside of New York City at the time, and I had never been to Whitehall, but after watching Beast of Whitehall, I said, we have to get up there.
Gotta get there, right?
So we went up and we went to the Skeensboro Museum, which is the local museum there, as you know. And this lovely gentleman gave us the full tour. And once he heard I was into Bigfoot, he pulled out a map. He showed me where the creatures have been seen, where they might possibly migrate down from Canada. And it was just the most incredible experience of my life.
Wow.
And
Yeah, that's
while I
cool.
was there, I took home a souvenir from the museum. At the time, they were selling these little wooden Sasquatch statues. And oh my God, I had to have one. And as soon as I got home, I thought, what a great experience. I was able to learn something, and I was able to take home a souvenir. And every time I look at this little statue, it always reminds me to keep going and keep researching, because this thing is out there. And so that's kind of what inspired me to start my organization and sell my products alongside of it.
Boy, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a great way to get into it. Whitehall is certainly a really fun place. I've been there
Mm-hmm.
multiple times. Obviously, been to the Whitehall Sasquatch Calling Festival as well. Saw
Mm-hmm.
you there this past year. That was quite a turnout. It was really amazing. That was my first time at
Oh,
the festival.
yeah, best yet.
Oh, yeah, that's what everyone was telling me. But there's so many, it's kind of and that's something I want to talk about with you a little bit is this, Bigfoot on the East Coast. Obviously, I'm up here in the Northeast, kind of New Hampshire area, northern New England, with a lot of woods, a lot of stories, but the culture, and as you know, as somebody who's been out west as well, places like Oregon and California, Washington, there's the cultural presence of Bigfoot is there, or maybe even down south in certain areas like, the skunk ape or Fouke. Whereas the
Mm-hmm.
Northeast, there really hasn't been that. And I think Whitehall was sort of the first place that embraced the Sasquatch topic. I mean, what have you noticed in your time, kind of going up to Whitehall? Have you seen more of an interest? Have you seen, kind of people going there more for Sasquatch, or what have you seen?
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. I think on the West Coast and, a lot of other places in the country, Bigfoot is kind of a household name to people. Whereas, like you said, in the Northeast, many people don't know about it. And growing up just outside of New York City, and anyone I told about Bigfoot would look at me like I had two heads, and they had no idea. But I did run across a lot of people who maybe had summer homes in the upstate New York area or New
Right.
Hampshire, Maine, and those people did know of Sasquatch. And I think what I love so much about the Whitehall area is that when you go up there, you can go into the local supermarket, you could go to the gas station, any local place, and you can ask them about Bigfoot, and they welcome you with open arms. They'll tell you a story that maybe happened to them or someone they knew. And I just love the culture that surrounds Sasquatch in the Northeast. I think it's kind of a hush hush topic, which to me, that attracts me even more to the subject out here, because I feel like there's something to be discovered that nobody else here knows about. So it makes the mystery even cooler to me, that it's kind of more taboo out here.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things that's something that's kept me interested in the subject. There's a lot of online drama and madness, and a lot of fakery, hoaxes, and stuff like that. But you get some of those eyewitness stories, from people that are in an area that does not really have a culture so much of
Mm-hmm.
Bigfoot. It's starting now, but it wasn't like that. And you hear these stories, people that have sat on their sightings for years, for decades. That why are they making up a story? And it sounds very similar to a story that you might hear in Oregon or Colorado or wherever. It's just kind of strange. To me, it sort of speaks to the possibility that there's some sort of a consistent species patterns, things going on. But that definitely is an interesting point that come to think of it, makes the Northeast sort of a. I kind of see it as a little bit of like you're blazing the trail almost. There
Yeah.
have been
Mm-hmm.
there have been some Bigfoot researchers in this area for sure, and there's plenty of great ones,
Yes.
but there's not as many as out in other places for
There's
sure.
not enough.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And there's just so much space. I mean, you look at talking about Whitehall specifically, and then into the Adirondacks. I mean, that is just a gigantic area.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, a lot of people, when I tell them that I research in New York, they're like, oh, New York, they think about hot dog carts
Yeah.
and,
Downtown
skyscrapers.
Brooklyn,
But
where's Bigfoot?
yeah, exactly. But you know what? Let them think that, because then it's more wilderness for me to explore.
Yeah,
But,
seriously.
I mean, it does. It is a really vast wilderness, and I think there are definitely less people out here looking for Bigfoot. So I personally think, from my experience, that the Bigfoots out here are maybe easier to trick than the Bigfoots out west.
Hmm,
I mean, it could be just me overthinking it, but I
sure.
feel like since there aren't a lot of researchers howling in the woods and trying to, set up trail cams and catch these things, I think that maybe it's easier to throw out a call or a wood knock, and maybe they're
Get
more
something.
willing to respond.
Right. No, it's certainly interesting. And that's, I think, part of developing sort of regional characteristics, regional patterns, what is really going on here. Because I mean, we know so little when it comes to this topic, unfortunately. As much as we know, I mean, we don't know, right? There's many more questions for every possible answer, which isn't really even definitively an answer. But we'll get into all that. I do just want to say hey to everyone in the chat. Got a lot of awesome folks. What's going on, Scottish Wildman? Hello, Sandra Piper. We have Rock Kite Man says greetings programs. Glenn H, how's it going? New Hampshire Sasquatch. Hey everyone. Hey Alex. Hope all is going well. Absolutely. Hope you're doing well, man. Jonathan of Western Bigfoot Exploration. What is going on, dude? Jonathan's awesome. Finally having Emily on. Absolutely. Roger Blair, howdy from Kentucky. Howdy indeed. Peggy Curtis, happy New Year. Missed you all last week. Watched the recorded show though. It was awesome. Thank you, Peggy. Hopefully it was great. Mike Knapp, Breaking Bigfoot. What's going on, Jesus? So he is down in New Mexico. I believe, his other comment says, I'm opening a Bigfoot museum and research center. That is freaking awesome, man.
That's exciting.
I would love to hear more about that. They got this guy, Tate. He says, Alex sucks. Hi, everyone. Okay, cool, Tate. As Bigfoot Society, Jeremiah says that Bob Hieronymus probably. Illuminathan, robot malfunction. I don't know what that means. But anyway, lots of great people in the chat. Francesca E says, hey, Alex. Howdy, all. Welcome, Emily. Absolutely. Tactical Mike is also in the chat, if I can find out where he's at. Says everything of Westchester is a different state. Well, specifically Bigfoot Anon. We got a lot of people in the chat. Jonathan Dodd, what's going on, man? Hey, folks. Hi, Emily. Kaiju Ninja as well. They just keep coming. They're just endless. So there's Jay as well. What is going on? Jay of Bigfoot Barbecue and Camp Cookbook.
Awesome.
So lots of great people. I don't want to offend anyone for not reading it. There's just a lot of folks in the chat. So we appreciate everyone here as always. You guys are awesome. And I know there's this running joke. They're trying to make me laugh because they say that I'm too serious. So Tate and these band of minions are trying to crack jokes, and I can keep a good straight face. So keep trying, guys. And if
That's
you see me burst out laughing, Emily, I'm not laughing at you. It's just these guys are they're a riot over here. But anyway, back to the topic on hand. So, Whitehall, for people that don't really know, maybe say a little bit about kind of Whitehall as a region, I guess, and maybe a little bit of the history. We've had Paul Bartholomew on the show a long time ago, and we've talked to others about it. But let's give people sort of a recap about Whitehall who might not be from the area.
Sure. So Whitehall, New York is a very rural, upstate New York town. And there's a rich history. It's the birthplace of the United States Navy. So at one time, it was this hoppin' boppin' town. It was the place to be. But over the years, it became more rural. Less people lived there. And during the 70s, there was kind of a flap of Bigfoot sightings, including one encounter with law enforcement. And that's kind of what coined Whitehall as the Bigfoot capital of the East, which some people call it. And this whole incident involves law enforcement seeing this creature. One officer in particular I had on my podcast. I don't know if you've ever had Brian Goslin on, but he's an incredible researcher, and he had a very up close encounter with this creature in Whitehall where he saw it face to face. He could describe every detail. And I think being that these law enforcement officers were out there and saw the same creature that all these civilians were seeing, it really lends a lot of credibility to this flap of sightings that was going on. Farmers were seeing it. A lot of people in the town saw this creature, and it's a really interesting story and a lot of history there with Bigfoot, and sightings continue up until this day. The town has changed a little bit since these sightings have occurred, but people still have encounters near and around the area.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I've read Brian's book. I think I met him at some point. We filmed. You were in it last summer, rather, on the Trail of Bigfoot, the Journey, of course, which was about Bigfoot in the Adirondacks. We did a recap show for people who want to dig into, I guess, ancient history. Go to June of 2020 if you want to see the recap show we did with Seth and those guys. But that was, I've always kind of seen Whitehall as almost as this gateway to the Adirondacks. You have that Green Mountain section of Vermont right there, which is, I've had some pretty strange stuff happen there. It's a really, really cool spot. But then you get to Whitehall, and then that's sort of the gate. That's where the Adirondack Park starts. And from there, you get into some of those really far off places. And we took a helicopter flight over from right near kind of Lake George. So we would have flown over Whitehall to the high peaks, and you get a feel for how crazy this area is. Plus, you have Lake Champlain ends right at Whitehall. So as somebody that's been into Champ and Lake Champlain monster for a while, there's people in Whitehall who talk about Champ. I mean, there's a Champ's restaurant down the street in Whitehall where there's Bigfoot statues and Bigfoot restaurants. So it's pretty cool. It's like a cryptid cross point where you have this this meeting place of Bigfoot and Champ. Now, places in Whitehall that are interesting. There's spots like that Steve Coles has looked into and other researchers over the years. Have you gone to any kind of, you don't have to obviously give the specific locations, but have you had anything happening around Whitehall, or do you have any spots you like to go and kind of hit up when you're there in terms of wooded areas or research areas or anything like that?
Well, I have to say, field work is definitely new to me. Over the course of the pandemic, basically, I lost my full-time job when the pandemic started. And so it actually allowed me the chance to be doing more field work. And after being featured in the Small Town Monsters documentary, it really inspired me to kind of take hold of New York and say, okay, this is something that I need to do because nobody's doing it in this state. Well, Paul Bartholomew, oh my gosh, the most amazing researcher. But
he's one of my favorites.
There's not a lot of people doing it in New York. And I thought, wow, like I could really, gather some information and talk to Paul, work with him. I actually asked him to join my organization as kind of an advisory member. So he's been guiding me along the way while I'm up there. And I took a couple of trips to this area, and I went on a bunch of different trails. What I like to do in that particular area is just download the app All Trails. I like to find a trail where not a lot of people are leaving reviews, meaning that not a lot of people are really going on these trails. And I like to just, kind of go on a guided trail and see where it takes me. Go off the beaten path, take a look. I try to be careful because on this side of the country, there's a lot of like private land and state land, and you kind of have to be a little more careful out here. And that's something I noticed being out on the West Coast for 3 months. Most of it is just national forest. So you can go at any time of the day, you can be there whenever you want. Whereas on the East Coast, it's a little tricky with, where you can go and where you can't. So for the couple of times that I have been out, I've stuck to just, trails that I found on All Trails. But I did have some pretty interesting things happen, noises here and there. But the biggest thing was a possible footprint that I discovered in Vermont. It was in the Fairhaven region, which is really not far at all from Whitehall. And
you got the Pulteney River that goes right through there. And that chunk of Whitehall where Abear happened is basically a chunk of Vermont that was given to New York. I mean, if you look at the way the river works and through Lake Champlain, so very interesting.
Absolutely. So I did find a footprint over in the Fairhaven area. And I mean, I did not expect to find this at all. I was on a trail that I found on All Trails, and this was a populated trail in the summer, but I was there during the wintertime in, I think it was like late November. And, it was freezing. It had to have been like 20 degrees. Well, a lot of people listening are probably like, that's not freezing, but for the East Coast, that's cold. And so it was, I was walking along this trail, and right before I had left the trail, I said, let's check some river beds and some creek beds. So I went over to a creek, and lo and behold, I found this really compelling looking footprint that had 5 toes, and it wasn't huge. It was probably the size of a grown man's foot. But, I tried casting it, and because of the weather conditions, the plaster just did not really take well, and I kind of completely effed it up, and I was so mad at myself. But that's part of Bigfooting. We have to learn, and we, as much as we want to be scientists, we're not scientifically trained to go out and do field work, so we have to train ourselves. And so I'm hoping that eventually I can travel back to that area and hopefully find whoever made that footprint.
Yeah, no, definitely, that would be interesting. And that's part of it, I think, is you learn along the way. That's what I think a lot of people, like Cliff, as I'm sure Cliff Barrickman and others will say, practice casting other things. And I encourage that too. I mean, I love to, if I get a good moose print or a bear print, it's just awesome to add to your collection. You learn how to cast. It's better to screw up a moose print than potentially something like a Sasquatch, which, I mean, some people have found one print, maybe a couple of prints in their entire Bigfoot researching kind of career.
Mhm.
So, yeah, definitely interesting. We're definitely getting roasted in the comments for the weather thing. So Mike says it's 12. It's 12 today here. It is really. I gotta say, New Hampshire, it's pretty cold. Oh, there's actually another New Hampshire person says 2 degrees in northern New Hampshire.
Wow.
I'm in the southern part, so that's pretty rough. And I was just gonna say the Canadians probably have us all beat. So Kevin Hamilton says we went through a 2-week cold snap here, where average daytime temps were colder than minus 30 Celsius. That's cold even for a Canuck like me.
Oh
Oh
my
boy.
gosh. I can't
So,
even imagine.
and then Southern Grit says 60 degrees here in Florida. So great.
That's nice.
Awesome. But I did see Southern Grits. You said something about you're up by Ocala National Forest. Really interesting. I love that place. Maybe I'll message you about that. Would be curious to talk to you about that. Yeah. So now, before we kind of get into, I'm trying to think, should we just jump into that right away? Do you want to maybe just talk about what the forest fleur is? Before I wanted to get into a little bit of discussion about, you're obviously out on the West Coast you're mentioning 3 months there. The differences kind of between Bigfooting out there, Bigfooting out here, what your kind of noticeable differences between that. But let's just go into what the forest fleur is and talk all about that before we really jump into it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the forest fleur started out as, me doing some school reports on Bigfoot and making a couple of coasters with a Bigfoot silhouette on them. And it's grown into something that I never expected. And it really is my life's passion. What I do at the Forest Fleur is I research the science and history behind Sasquatch. I like to make evidence easy for everyone to understand, because when I started researching this, reading a lot of scientific papers and books, it was a little difficult for me to understand the anatomy, behind these footprints and this evidence. I've kind of researched a lot and put that information on my website for everybody so that it's easy to understand. Anyone of any level can learn about Sasquatch through my organization. And eventually I plan on, doing some lectures and teaching people about this. I think it's just so important to take what the generation before us has done and expand upon it. A lot of people have watched the TV shows. We've learned from the researchers,
So here's the
but I think
website.
it's
I'm trying to pull it up.
I think it's really important to, take that information and continue researching and use that as the foundation for future research. So I like to kind of inspire people of my generation to go out and look for Bigfoot. And I think it's really important to just keep the science of this alive, because at the end of the day, this is a real species. It's an undiscovered species. And, just like Jane Goodall studied chimpanzees, I think it's important for people to be studying Bigfoot in the field so that we can learn more about them and be able to protect them potentially if they are an endangered species, which I believe they probably are either there or heading towards it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I pulled up the website. People in the comments are saying, as Mike says, Emily makes great Bigfoot products and has a nice website. And then Southern Grits was asking, website, will you list it? So the link, if you want to check out yourself, is down below. I do have it pulled up here. And I do just have to say, it's probably one of the best looking Bigfoot websites. I mean, obviously, you put care into making it look a certain way that's got that aesthetic, the sort of woodsy kind of aesthetic. And you go and check out, I mean, guys, it really is cool. I'm not just saying that.
Oh,
I mean, there's a lot of different links and I love the interactive map. I was playing with this earlier.
Yeah.
And this is done by the guy who does the Bigfoot mapping, Scott, who I've been working with on a project. We'll talk about that at some point, guys. I'll let you know. But I'm doing some mapping stuff with him. I'm going to have him on the show eventually. He is a real great dude.
He's awesome.
This is so cool. So you can just go on there and this is, you can check out sightings. You can do whatever. Now, I do want to talk just about the products because, you have a lot of cool ones, but also the way you kind of procure them is sort of unique with using kind of the more sustainable model. And I'll let you kind of talk about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I went to school for product development. So product development is another passion of mine. I would say aside from Bigfoot, that's really, one of my bigger interests and hobbies. So I thought to myself, my experience in Whitehall, taking home that souvenir, I have it in my bookcase. I look at this souvenir every day and it reminds me, keep doing this. This is a real thing. Somebody took the time to carve out a Bigfoot and put it in the local museum. There's more to this. It's not just a legend. So I wanted people to be able to come to my website, learn about Bigfoot, and then take home a souvenir. Perhaps they don't have the financial ability to travel to areas with Bigfoot sightings or museums or, local history. So I'd love for people to be able to come to my website and learn about Bigfoot and take home a souvenir. And of course, my products do fund my research, and I'm so fortunate for that. Anything that I make off of the products, I just put right back into my organization, and I use it for fieldwork equipment or, traveling, like my trip to Oregon for 3 months. And it's just a wonderful way to support my research. And I just appreciate everyone who has purchased within the holiday season this year.
Yeah, and I got to say, just personally, that these beanies here, they're probably one of my favorite items. I have like a lighter, I think, yellow, not yellow, but like
Oh yeah,
it's like a dusty kind of color. We use them all the time out in the field. As I'm sure you've seen on Beyond the Trail. We're always rocking that. With a collapsible bucket. I have this thing somewhere here. Don't know where it is. I had one of those coasters. Oh, it's actually right here. So I remember you gave us this when we were in Whitehall.
Yep.
A little coaster with a little like magnet on the back, I guess. Super
Yep.
cool. Made of a little kind of a sapling tree, which is really neat.
Yeah, I definitely like to support like artisans all over the world. So all of my wood products are made in Australia by a really wonderful craftsman. And a lot of my products I like to source from, local US made. Not all of them are, some of them come from other parts of the world, but it's been so much fun to just curate this collection. And everything in my product line has an eco-friendly element. So I've tried to keep it pretty sustainable. Of course, it's impossible to be 100% environmentally friendly, but I try my best. And I've just had such a blast making that stuff. And honestly, when I casted the footprint I found incorrectly, that's what inspired me to create my expedition gear with the collapsible bucket and the evidence flags and stuff, because I thought to myself, if only I had the right materials to have casted this print, so I want everyone to have access to that. So I just created it.
Yeah, no, and this is actually a good point. Mike says, I'm partial to the flags. Yes, the flags are awesome. So this flag here, yeah, we have a few of them that we use, and they're really cool because, like, let's say you find something interesting in the woods. We've used it for, non-Bigfoot related stuff too, but you find a print, you can mark it there if you want to come back and get some plaster. If you don't have plaster, whatever, maybe you're getting lost. You could use them as a trail marker sort of thing. There's a lot of uses. Absolutely. It's just really cool. It's almost like a little kind of golf flag type thing.
Yeah, and Mike actually inspired those flags. I had him on my podcast, and he had told me, how he uses those in his research. And I thought, wow, what a great idea to be able to mark evidence. Because half the time researchers find themselves stepping over stuff and destroying possible evidence. So I think it's really a useful tool.
A bright orange flag in the woods. Now you've also have the podcast element. So that is, and there's the live stream on there, which is awesome. It's like I didn't know it's kind of flashing. I guess that means it's live. But you've interviewed obviously a lot of folks, and you do a ton of awesome interviews. I've been on your show as well. You do a really good job putting that together. So how is the podcast side of things? Is that how people kind of have gotten to be familiar with you, or where would you say people are kind of coming from?
I would say the podcast is probably a big avenue. I don't think there are a lot of podcasts on just Sasquatch. A lot of them cover all cryptids, which is wonderful. It's so exciting to learn about all different ones. But I think people have definitely discovered me through my podcast. It started out, I was just interviewing researchers that contacted me through social media. And then it expanded to people like Dr. Jeff Meldrum and Kathy Strain and, Cliff Barrickman, Bobo. So it's definitely expanded. And I've interviewed so many wonderful researchers. Most recently, I interviewed Peter Byrne for the second time. Actually, the third time. I interviewed him 3 times for the podcast. And it's been amazing to get to know people because, you have these people that are famous in some people's eyes. They were on a TV show, or they're a kind of a heavy hitter researcher. But then you also have researchers that, maybe people don't know about. And I love bringing light to those people, and bringing the spotlight, putting it on them, because I've learned more from people that are not on TV than anyone who's been on TV. And not to take away anything from the stars, but I mean,
Sure.
I learned so much from everybody. And I think it's so important to, interview people, exchange theories. I think that's the only way we're going to discover this thing, is by exchanging theories and learning from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like this part too. I mean, about preservation, but no, you're right. Talking to people, I think, is important. And I mean, that's what I do with this show. We just have conversations, and there's a lot of other shows, obviously, that do similar kind of thing. And
Right.
I think that's great. We're talking about it. We're having conversations. When we're not in the field, it's good to talk about these sort of things, bounce ideas off. But this is cool. This is more kind of the eco aspect of you're almost using the Bigfoot here as a sort of steward of the forest, which I think that Bigfoot has been used for that role quite a bit, which I think is great. Just kind of trying to make sure to teach responsibility. I found that there's a lot of new people getting out into the wilderness nowadays, especially with everything going on in the world. A lot more people have been hiking and camping in the past few years, perhaps that never went before. So, maybe you can use Bigfoot as a way to encourage them to not litter, but also for those people that don't listen, you can use it to scare them, be like, this thing will eat you if you litter when you're camping. So maybe it's a bit of a double-edged thing. I don't know.
There's an approach. Yeah,
If it
I would
doesn't work
say
willingly, it's got to be aggressively, I guess, right?
Yeah, and I think it's really important to, preserve the environment, not only just because the environment is beautiful, but I truly think that Bigfoot can be affected by our trash. And the reason I say this is because I know somebody who worked in a lab that tested on monkeys, in order to develop vaccines for humans, which of course is very sad that, this is done. But at the same time, whatever, let's put that aside. And he had told me that every time they give their primates something to eat, they have to soak it in a diluted bleach bath, because our germs can actually really affect these animals. And so my thought is, a lot of these researchers believe in like the gifting thing. They'll leave out apples or candy bars or something for Sasquatch, which I totally understand the idea behind it. But I think it's a good idea to just be careful about how we're doing that, and to maybe just make sure we wear gloves, and if there's any trash out in the woods, to just pick it up, because the last thing we want is for these creatures to be touching our things and then maybe carrying, picking up the diseases that we carry as Homo sapiens.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting take. I mean, people think of Bigfoot as this big kind of aggressive sort of thing in the forest that probably is tough or whatever. But, other apes, as tough as they are, chimps are way stronger than, chimp, which is on average shorter than the average adult male human, 3 times stronger. They can still get diseases transferred to us. I mean, that happens with monkeys and apes. So Bigfoot presumably is some kind of a primate, whether that means it's in the Homo lineage or something, Australopithecines, whatever you want to call it, even if it's Gigantopithecus, for those Gigano folks, it is still, that would still put it in an ape. So there's some crossover there between us and them. But unless it's going through portals and aliens, then that's it. I don't know. That's then
Listen, if that's true, if that's true, I'm out of here. That's too scary.
I know, that's almost more disturbing. But no, just in general, I definitely recommend folks check it out. I mean, there's just a lot on the website. I mean, you can really just go through the research sections and read some of, this is almost like more of a blog kind of thing that you would have written. But you also have stuff about the, that basic stuff for Bigfoot evidence. Probably a good place to send people, that aren't really familiar with Bigfoot. Be like, hey, check out this website. You can learn about whatever, orang pendek and all the other kind of things. So there's some good links to other things, the Sasquatch hair. It's a good little resource. It's almost like a digital version of Jeff Meldrum's sort of field guide that you can just take out with you, those little field guides. That's kind of what it reminds me of. It has that sort of similar aesthetic.
That's a nice compliment. Thank you.
So that's cool. No, absolutely. No, definitely very well made. I mean,
thank you.
I think that's that adds to the kind of ease of use and all that kind of stuff, especially for people, as I'm assuming part of your audience probably is folks that weren't really into Bigfoot before, that maybe are just kind of getting into it, as opposed to just straight up Bigfooters. So that's cool.
Yeah, and I like to tell people, I mean, I started out just interested in the subject, and now I know a lot more from learning from other researchers and podcasts and stuff like that. So I always tell people, even if you're not out in the field, boots on the ground, you can still be a good researcher if you
Oh, for
just get
sure.
in the books and develop your own theories, share those theories with others. I think anybody can be a useful addition to this community. I really do.
Absolutely. A lot of cool we had some questions coming in the comments, so I will start taking some questions here. But a lot of folks, we've got. Oh boy, I'm trying to keep track of this all. Serb guy 007 says, "Merry late Christmas, Alex." Oh, thank you. Yeah, Serbian Christmas was a few days ago.
Oh,
Um,
that's awesome.
very cool. Um, let's see. Where was that question? I saw there was a Kara question. Actually, this is a question from Kaiju Ninja who asked, "Are there hoodies? So, do you have hoodies or plans for hoodies or anything like that?"
I don't have hoodies right now. I'm working on some t-shirt designs with
Oh, cool.
a be out in the spring.
Yeah, the beanies are incredible. I may be obviously biased because I own one, but they're very comfy. Like they're very cool. I mean, we wear them all the time because you got the little Bigfoot on the side. I don't
Yeah.
have it on me right now, but
They are
definitely
definitely
cool.
my biggest seller.
Yeah, I can imagine. But again, I mean, you could get that's like a gift you get to somebody that's just passively into Bigfoot, right? Whereas you
Yeah.
also have a section of stuff that is legitimately useful. Like we have
Mm-hmm.
taken those collapsible buckets multiple times on Beyond the Trail episodes when we're filming because they're just so convenient. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we've backpacked into places and Eli will strap that bucket to his backpack and it's just dangling there. And as opposed to being like a big bucket that's flopping around, you just open it up and you get a lot more space. It's like a
Yeah.
collapsing, a telescoping or collapsing. I don't know what the term is, but
Mm-hmm.
very practical. So for actual people that are trying to get into research, definitely not a bad thing to get something like that. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
and actually, Kaiju Ninja asked, "Oh, she is the one who made that bucket that was featured in Beyond the Trail." Yeah, that was the one. That was the one. So Pablo, I can't get this comment to load. Pablo Zuluaga. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that. He says, "Wonder when Alex's next video is coming out." Probably have some stuff on this channel at some point, but we're gonna have Beyond the Trail Sasquatch Valley, which is about the Hayuwinta mountain range, coming out. I think either next week or the week after that, over on Small Town Monsters. That was when Eli and I backpacked many miles into this remote valley in Utah. Very excited for folks to see that.
I have to say, you guys are doing such a good job. I mean, it's just, it's so rare these days to find a good documentary that isn't just people cursing in the dark and, making stuff up. You guys are really doing a fabulous job of documenting the history and, showing what it's really like to be out there looking for these cryptids. I have to, hats off to you guys.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, we're just we're having fun. We're trying to keep it realistic and not,
Mhm.
engage in the sensationalism that I think typical TV or
Yes.
even a lot of YouTube stuff does nowadays. Because most of the time, unfortunately, Bigfoot research is boring. But
Yeah.
that's, science, I guess, is kind of boring in that respect too. There's like the breakthroughs are pretty few and far between. But
Yeah.
it's one of those things. I think we just need more of that level-headedness, and I think you certainly bring some of that. And that's something I want to talk about. Actually, is your team, and that's something I forgot to go
Sure.
over. So you have not only do you have your podcast, all that kind of stuff, but you also have this sort of team. Now, tell me a little bit about that. There's obviously some folks on here that people will be familiar with. Connor
Yes.
Anderson, he's been on the show before. He's been in Beyond the Trail. There's this guy Eli. I mean, I guess I don't know why you keep him around, but he's there. I feel bad for you, but no, I'm kidding. Obviously, I think I took that picture. That's in Maine. That was in our
Yeah, I
tent
was just gonna say
in
you
Maine.
definitely took that picture.
It's funny
um,
because I think we've been like testing out your products in the field, and like
yeah.
every time we're somewhere, we're taking pictures of the beanies or the masks or the hats or something like that,
Oh, that's so
and the shirts. It's
awesome.
so funny. We actually got funny story in Utah. We got Eli was wearing the shirt. We were in the Utah Museum of Dinosaurs or something like that in Vernal, Utah. And as we're paying for the ticket to get in, the lady was like, "Oh, are you guys Bigfoot hunters?" Because they saw the little Bigfoot on Eli's
Oh
shirt.
my
And she
God.
proceeds to tell us a story about her sister seeing Bigfoot in the Green River Valley, outside of that area. And I was like, this is so cool, So it did
That's
its job, I
great.
guess.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my team is I guess probably around 20, well, had it been like the fall of 2020, I guess. I had been friendly with all three of these guys for quite a while. I had met Eli at the Oregon Bigfoot Festival in 2019. And he came up to me and he gave me a cryptid campfire t-shirt. And I'm like,
Oh,
who
right
is
on.
this guy? He's so friendly, you know? And we just struck up a friendship. And then Connor, of course, I had him on the podcast, and he was just so impressive. He had so many great theories, and I learned so much from him. He had told me that every year he rereads all of his Sasquatch books. And I thought that was a
Oh,
really
wow.
interesting thing to do. Very time consuming, but I think every good researcher should do that. And I am guilty of not doing it, but I really was impressed by that. And then Levi is a historian, and I had him on my podcast when he was still in college doing a report on the Yeti. And he graduated with a history degree and then began researching more into Sasquatch and the Yeti. So all three of these guys, I struck up a friendship. I had talked to them a few times, had them on my podcast a few times. And then I thought to myself, you know, I am in New York, and it is expensive to travel the country. As much as I would love to go different places and be able to research in different states, it is very expensive and it is time consuming. So I
Yeah.
thought to myself, what if I assembled a team, especially during the pandemic when nobody was going anywhere? I wanted to have a team of people that were located in different parts of the country that could give their feedback on the local reports in their area and what was going on in their state, so that we can kind of exchange information, maybe identify some correlations between the states, and just learn more about the subject in general. So I contacted them each and I said, would you like to be an ambassador for the Forest Fleur and co-host some podcasts and, you know, kind of exchange information? You know, once a month we'll get together, we'll talk a little bit about what's been going on in our state. And we did this every single month, all through the pandemic, and they became some of my best friends I've ever had. And I'm just so proud that I've assembled a team of such amazing guys, because they, each of them brings something so special to the Forest Fleur, whether it's co-hosting a podcast or helping me to write a research article, or, you know, hosting me so graciously during my time in Oregon. All three of them are just amazing, and I can't say enough good things. So it's been a wonderful journey to have them on my team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've obviously worked with Eli exclusively, and
Mm-hmm.
I trust him with my life in a lot of
Yes.
situations. So he's a good dude to have on
Yes.
your team for sure. Big agree on that one there. So, okay, there's a lot of questions coming in. I'll just start firing them off here. Carrick, who is a great friend of the show, as folks know, asks, what was it like getting into being able to get eco-friendly products onto an online cryptozoology market? And I'd love to know more about what you did with the subject of Bigfoot back in school.
Yeah, that's a great question. It was not easy getting eco-friendly products. Basically, what I did was I just went on to Etsy, which is a
Nice.
marketplace for people who craft and create homemade things. And I went through so many businesses contacting them. You know, I have an idea for a product. Is this something you could make with an eco-friendly element? I really want it to be sustainable and to kind of complement what I'm trying to do, spread awareness about protecting Bigfoot's environment. And it was not easy, but eventually I did find some really amazing craftsmen that were willing to make products in a sustainable and eco-friendly way. So for example, my coasters and my ornaments and magnets, are made in Australia, and my craftsman he cuts down invasive trees that are actually harming the environment there, and he
Oh,
dries
wow.
them out, and he lets them, you know, cure outside in the fresh Australian air, and you know, he doesn't use many chemicals or anything. So he really tries to be as sustainable as possible. And then with my beanies, those are an environmental protection product, which means that the production process of making them kind of tries its best to limit the pollution. So I really try to incorporate an eco-friendly element into everything I do. And all of my packaging that you will receive in the mail is compostable. So that was also a struggle to find, a supplier that would do that for me. But I'm just really glad that I've gotten to the point where I can be proud to sell these products, because not only are they funding my research, but they are respecting the environment. And what was the other question? He had another one, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, sorry. It was about knowing more about what you did with the subject of Bigfoot back in school.
Yeah, I just wrote a lot of research papers on Bigfoot, some of which I ended up publishing on my website back in the day. But since then I've kind of tweaked them, and I think new evidence has come out that maybe contradicted what I originally wrote about. But a lot of my essays were just introductions into what Bigfoot is and the evidence behind it. And to be honest with you, my classmates were so impressed. They're like, what? People discovered footprints. There are researchers out there that actually care about this. So I mean, people were really shocked to find out that this was a real phenomenon and a real scientific field. And it was really fun, like sharing that with my classmates at the time.
Yeah, that's got to be interesting, bringing that up to people and showing folks that, I think that's, you mentioned the New York area, and I've talked to people from various places that live in urban areas, and they're usually the ones that say, oh, there's no way something like that could exist. We would have found it.
Yeah.
And it's very hard, as you've seen some areas that are wild in North America, to know how much space there is. Mm-hmm. It's actually insane how much space there is. So there's all kinds of stuff that could hide.
Absolutely.
But, here's a question from Jeremiah, friend of the program as well, over at Bigfoot Society, asks question, Emily, what was the number one lesson you took away from your time spent in squatching in Oregon?
Well, for those of you who don't know, I spent 3 months out in Oregon, the past 3 months, just researching and kind of bettering my field work and developing some new techniques and learning from the guys over at the North American Bigfoot Center. So I would say my biggest lesson was, I guess I thought I was going to go out into the field and be terrified. I thought, because I was going deep in the wilderness of Mount Hood National Forest. We were driving these logging roads. We were 2 hours into the woods at sometimes, driving distance. I mean, it was just so remote, not another soul in sight. And I really thought that going out and walking around these fields and the forest, I thought I would be terrified, because Bigfoot is traditionally known as kind of a monster. But it was quite the contrary. So I think the biggest lesson I took away was that this is a real species, and it feels the same way being out in the woods with Bigfoot as it does being out in the woods with any other forest animal, bears, mountain lions. You know that there's a risk, right? You know that you have to be careful, but I didn't feel that I was looking for a monster. I felt like I was really looking for an undiscovered species, and it felt very scientific to be out in the field. And I would say just treat your field work with a lot of respect. Take a scientific approach. That would be my biggest lesson, is just, don't look at this as you're hunting a monster. Look at it as you're trying to find evidence of an undiscovered species of animal, human, whatever it is. And I think you become more perceptive to what's around you when you get into that mindset.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting point. I think people are really, obviously a lot of the Bigfoot names have to do with the word monster being involved in it. Mm-hmm. Falk monster, whatever. There's an endless Mogollon monster, endless list, because I think people, it's that unknown that they're scared of. But once you sort of you familiarize yourself with it, the topic. I mean, the Bigfoot scaries are Bigfoot stories that are scary are kind of a dime a dozen, right? They're all over the place. We like to be scared, so that's why you have so many movies of Bigfoot, this murderer and killing everyone and that sort of stuff. And those of us that have been into the subject, you read most of the reports and you realize that there's not that extremely aggressive aspect. I mean, some people obviously get traumatized by whatever they've had an encounter. If it's aggressive or it really scares them, maybe they feel vulnerable. But that is definitely interesting. Now, Carrick followed up with his question, saying, it is incredibly refreshing to hear that you corrected some of your conclusions after hearing about new directions evidence was leading. That is very good scientific work. Absolutely. We need more of that. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that I think as well that, back in the day, I was like, oh, that's really solid evidence. It's really interesting. That now, once you learn certain aspects, or it's okay to change your mind. That's actually totally, that's good. That's definitely a part of scientifically operating.
I think some people may think, oh, I can't change my mind because then I'll lose credibility. But I think the most credible thing you can do is constantly be updating your theories to reflect the scientific evidence that's been found. I mean, when I first started out doing this, I was like, team human. Oh my God, this thing's a human. It's a Homo sapien. It's, but now that I've researched into human evolutions and I've learned so much, I think that it's probably closer to human. But I think at the end of the day, we are apes just as much as a chimpanzee or a gorilla. So I think at the end of the day, we do have to kind of look at it as an ape, but it may just be highly intelligent. Maybe it's an Australopithecine or something like that. But, you know, it very well could be a descendant of Gigantopithecus. And I think to look at it in both directions is important. And I think, you know, I've updated my theories to kind of look on both sides, because I think the only way we're going to discover this is by considering multiple different origins.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, that's definitely part of it, because we just unfortunately know so little. And you
Right.
know, we have a mixture of ape behaviors that are reported with other apes, the smells, you know, gorillas controlling scent glands, the
Mm-hmm.
knocks with chimps throwing rocks at trees. We have some of those aspects. Then we have things that are more, you know, on the, I guess, homo side of things. So
Right.
there's just a mixture. So I don't know what really is
Yeah.
going on. I think a lot of us are confused. Okay, this comment may make me crack and laugh. Kevin says Alex is a heavy hitter in the Bigfoot community now. He's the Ron Burgundy of Bigfoot anchorman. Thanks, Kevin. Use a good joke every once in a while.
That's
Central
great.
Florida Bigfoot Matt, what's going on, man? Jonathan Dodd, what is up, dude? He says, does Emily take Sasquatch reports? If so, what's her favorite encounter story? Great.
I do take Sasquatch reports. More recently, people have been reaching out to me with some of their evidence and reports. And I actually have a gentleman who reached out to me and became one of my members. I have since discontinued my membership program, but at the time he was a member, and he had some really wild evidence from Washington State. And he has pictures of footprints and some evidence that he found, and I'll be sharing that on my website within the next few weeks. He's putting together a presentation for me. Another gentleman reached out telling me a story of a Sasquatch crossing the road, and he ended up seeing it go into the, you know, the bank of the snow bank on the opposite side. But I think my favorite encounter story comes from a professor that lives near me, and I know him personally. And he had told me a story that one of his friends told him. This couple was camping up, well, kind of camping up in the Fort Anne area, which is right near Whitehall, New York.
Yep.
And they would stay in a farmer's trailer on his property for a little vacation. You know, they'd do a little getaway. This took place in the 70s. So at the time, you know, they didn't have a lot of money. So they would just go up and stay in this little trailer on this farmer's property. And they ended up encountering a Sasquatch. I have a podcast about this incident, but it's extremely interesting. They encountered a Sasquatch. The farmer's dog was cowering under the porch. This dog had fought off bears. It had scars all over its nose from fighting off black bears. Yet this dog was cowering in fear, and they smelled this strong skunky smell. Well, they got to the trailer, and the power was cut off because they forgot to tell the farmer that they'd be staying a few extra days on the property. So the farmer just cut the electricity and went out to town. So as they were there at night, you know, they lit some candles and eventually blew them out and went to sleep. And they started hearing something strange outside of the trailer, and the door handle started jiggling, and they heard something outside, you know, hitting on the trailer and stuff. So the husband said, "Oh, you know, go look out the window," which not really a good husband, but he's like, "Oh, you know," he says, "Edith, go look out the window." Yeah, you go first. So she looks out the window and she sees these two glowing red eyes and a silhouette of a Sasquatch. She jumped back so far, she hit her back on the cabinets of the trailer. Her husband goes out with a shotgun and tries to, you know, see whatever's out there. And unfortunately, they didn't get a better look at it. But that's probably one of my favorite stories because it was very authentic. You know, it was just this couple trying to have a little vacation, and you know, and they encountered something really interesting right outside of Whitehall, New York. So it just goes to show you, during the 70s, there really was a flap of sightings.
Yeah, I mean, the golf course too was pretty interesting, and that Skeen Valley golf course, I think it's called. They have the Bigfoot statue in there now, but the owner had seen a Bigfoot there before that flap with the 76, I believe,
Yep.
with the Abear Road incident, which is just absolutely fascinating.
It is.
Now, lots of Tate's got a good one. He says, "Question: Are there plans for men's boxers?" Love the hat, by the way.
No plans for men's boxers, but hey, that would probably be a good Valentine's Day product line.
That would be, yeah. You could come up with some funny stuff for that for sure.
Yeah.
Everyone needs a good pair of boxers for sure. Maybe some comfy, Bigfoot boxers, like
Yeah, maybe some kind of
Bigfoot
like
fur on them.
utility element.
Yeah. Oh man, that's
Put a
good.
night vision camera in the side of them.
Absolutely. So Mike asks, what is the best evidence that Emily has found?
I would say, oh gosh, when I was in Oregon, I experienced the most incredible encounter of my life. I heard vocalizations clearly, and I can tell you without a doubt, there was just nothing else that it could have been. And I know that that's probably unscientific of me, because I should probably sit here and say, oh, well, it could have been a Sasquatch, it could have been
Right.
something else. But when you hear these things for yourself, you just know that, it can't be anything else. And what I found interesting about the vocalizations that I heard is there was kind of an undertone to them. So it was almost like two people harmonizing, within one sound, which was very interesting to me. And I spoke to the people that I was with at the time, and we all kind of agreed that there were some sort of undertone to these calls that humans really wouldn't be able to replicate. So what had happened was I was out with Connor and Keith of the North American Bigfoot Center. We were
Good
driving.
dudes.
Yeah, great people. We were driving the logging roads at night, and Keith had said, let's stop. I just have this feeling that we should stop and we should just listen. So we stopped the truck and we're just listening. And I said to Connor, I'm like, hey, go out there and do a Bigfoot call. So he gets out and he does an Ohio howl. And he starts hearing something calling back. So immediately, Keith and I jumped out of the car and we grabbed a recorder. We put it on the back of the truck. We should have had the parabolic mic, but we didn't that day, which, of course, that's just Bigfooters' luck. But we did have a recorder, and I do have the recording on my website under the Undiscovered page. There's a whole video
Cool.
vlog of the incident. And so we listened, and Connor did another couple of calls, and sure enough, something answers to the north of us down by a lake. And this sound was a high-pitched woo! It went on for so long. There's no way a human could have done that. Then
creepy.
we heard to the south of us another call, high-pitched woo! And then coyotes kind of muffled that, so we couldn't hear it too much afterwards. Then Connor did a couple more Ohio howls, and to the west of us, down by the creek, we hear this low-pitched sound. It was the most incredible thing I will take back what I said before about not being scared. In that moment, it was scary. The noise that low-pitched one made, and it was close. It was really freaky. So that was the best evidence I came across. It was the best experience of my entire life. And then a couple of weeks later, I did maybe about a month later, I did some more field work out there with the guys. And this time we were with Nico from the NABC and Connor. And Connor and I both saw a shadow pass through two trees. And this was huge.
Wow.
I don't know. I really just don't have an explanation of anything else that it could have been, besides for maybe both of our eyes playing tricks on our eyes at the same time. I don't know. It was just the shape of it was so Sasquatch-like, and it was so big. I don't really know what else it could have been besides maybe the moon shifting several thousand feet within a couple of seconds and the lighting. Yeah. I don't know what it was. I can't say it was a Sasquatch because I didn't see any detail, but there was a huge shadow passing between two trees. So needless to say, it was just an incredible experience all around. And there was more that happened there. So if you want to learn more about what happened, you can check out my Undiscovered page.
It's again, that site is linked in the description below, folks. But yeah, that's so much of this field. Unfortunately, it's like you have these encounters that there's so like you in the moment that it's something not right is going on. I mean, not right in the sense that this thing doesn't belong there, but it has to be part of the environment if they're living in all these places. But it's just so out of the ordinary. Even if you do spend a lot of time in the woods, weird things do happen. Animals make some crazy noises, can do some crazy things. But sometimes it's just, you have these little fleeting glimpses of what's possibly there, but you can never say, like definitively, well, so it's enough to kind of keep you going to the next sort of thing. So
yeah. And what's funny is that like, if Bigfoot was a recognized animal, we would be like, oh yeah, I saw a Sasquatch last night, because at that point it's so, mainstream. Like you think you see something brown in the woods, you go, oh yeah, I probably saw a deer, but with Sasquatch, we have to be so skeptical because we don't want to contribute false data to this, field.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and I think that answers. We had two very similar questions. One from Southern Grits. What is your experience? And Kaiju was asking, has Emily had a possible encounter? Has she heard vocalization? So that answers those two questions. But we do have this one from our buddy Jonathan, Western Bigfoot Exploration, who asks, question: if you could spend 1 week in a place that you have been to search for Bigfoot, where would you choose and why? Good question.
Hmm. That's a good question. Um, it's hard to choose. I really loved
So
Oregon
tough.
because it was so different and vast, and it
Yeah.
felt like I was in Jurassic Park. It really feels like you're in
Those
another world.
ferns. Yeah.
Exactly. And what I loved about it, and you'll probably agree with me, is when you're out there, it's just silent.
It's
Whereas
crazy. Yeah.
it on the East Coast, at least with my experience, there's so many bugs and noises. Like you can't really out there is just pure silence. I don't know, it was Maine like that?
No, Maine was it was the worst bug situation we probably ever had. The northern
Really?
those northern climates get really really bad with the bugs. I mean, we were just inundated. It was brutal. But that is something, and I've talked about this before, just there's that difference between out west. I mean, a place that's similar out in like Colorado and the Rockies, which I love. Some of my favorite places to research are
Hmm.
out there. There's that silence. I mean, you get some bugs in the summer, but not as many. We were there in Oregon in July, and yeah, there
Hmm.
wasn't much bugs. There's a little bit, but at night, you're sitting up there, and we hiked to some of those alpine lakes in the Mount Hood Wilderness. We drove into some of these logging areas, probably some of the same areas. We were
Yeah,
obviously coordinating with Connor and Keith at the
right.
museum and Cliff and everything, and we had those interesting vocals that our buddy Ron, got that were like
Yes.
virtually within a few miles from where Connor had recorded something super similar a few years before, around the same time of year.
Yep.
So
And
that
that's
area is
right around the
amazing.
area that I heard my vocalizations. So it's
So
all, yep.
yeah, so it's just a great area. But yeah, there's something. I mean, the East Coast, I think there's a lot of potential here, but it
Mhm.
does kind of suck with the bugs. My favorite time is the fall out here,
Right.
just because the weather cools down. The only thing is, you do get a lot of sticks and stuff falling, so you might think you have
True.
a knock, but it's a lot of times it's debris falling because of the autumn. But um,
Yep. Yep. I
yeah.
agree. So I would say, depending on the time of year, I think I would love to be in New York to, do an expedition. But I think, when it comes to sitting and listening for vocalizations, I think out west is the best. But a place that I'd like to get to that I haven't been to is Tennessee. I heard that that's
Oh
a
yeah.
really great place.
I've
So,
heard some good stuff about Tennessee too. Yeah, I think
mm,
Bobo at one point was telling me that was like one of his favorite Bigfooting places that he's ever been to.
yeah.
Because I was like, oh, where would you go to Bigfoot? Like, what's your go-to? And he's like, Tennessee's top. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I've heard a
Isn't that
lot. The
so
Smoky Mountain. I
crazy?
mean, the Smoky Mountains are amazing, so
Yeah, they're
it makes
beautiful. Oh,
sense.
it's so beautiful. I've been there before, but when I was very little for vacation,
Yeah,
nothing Bigfoot related.
yeah, same. Yeah, I haven't been down there Bigfoot wise. I mean, we're going to be going to North Georgia at some point here in 2022. So
Ooh,
it's interesting because we have the Appalachians. Obviously all these areas we're talking about, even in your
yeah,
areas in Whitehall and in the Adirondacks, that's all basically connected in one way or another to that Appalachian mountain range. And the
absolutely.
Adirondacks are a little further off, but geologically very similar to the White Mountains that we have up here in
Yep.
New Hampshire. And that is, there might, I don't know if this is probably a crazy thing to even say, that there's possibly more Sasquatch distributed between, like the southern Appalachians to the northern Appalachians than the entire West Coast. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just because it's such a vast area, whereas you
Yeah.
have probably some of the best habitat, at least in my opinion, in the world is probably, from that Northern California area to Alaska. That territory, I mean, that's like bar none for, I would
Prime.
imagine, for behavior, for habitat for these things. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but so there's a lot of interesting places. But here's a good one from Matt, who's obviously does a lot of photography down in Florida. So he asked, what is her go-to camera?
Well, believe it or not, I film everything on my cell phone. I have a Google Pixel, and it's amazing. It's like having a camera in my pocket, and I'm looking to upgrade to the next one. But I do definitely want to get a professional camera. I think it's important to have that on you. But honestly, when we're talking about Bigfoot, if you're looking to get footage of something, I think the best way is just to have a GoPro on you, because if you see this thing, a lot of people are like, oh, if I see Bigfoot, I'm going to take out my phone or my camera and I'm going to take a picture of it. When you see a wild animal, or let's just say you came across like a feral human, the last thing you want to do is take your eyes off of it. You want to make sure you're keeping tabs on it, that it's not going to run and charge you. So the last thing you're going to want to do is not look at it, look down and distract yourself and grab something to take a picture. So I think the best way to approach it is to just have a GoPro on you. I think that's really, and you could go on Amazon nowadays and you could find stuff like a GoPro that does the same thing, and they're pretty affordable. So I'm looking into some of those myself. But I also think something important to have is a DJI stabilizer. I have one of those, and you basically just attach your cell phone to it, and there's an app that you connect it to, and it stabilizes all your footage. So if you did see a Bigfoot, you'd be able to get a stabilized film of it. And I think that's like a really important thing. So I do have one of those, and I absolutely love it.
Right on. Yeah, I was going to say, Matt probably, I know he talks about gimbals quite a bit, and he's trying to kind of push people to encourage people to step their photography game up, because, you know, people are out there, because, yeah, every video we have, or, you know, a lot of the new stuff is sort of potato quality, let's put it that way, you know.
Yeah,
it's like,
unfortunately.
and with these, and like iPhones, I know mine, like the zoom is pretty terrible on there, but yeah, there's a lot. I mean, GoPros are certainly an option. There's a lot of stuff, you know, you can consider. And that's part of the tough, you know, what works in the field and what doesn't. Maybe in some areas, certain things work better than in other spots. But so, yeah, there's a ton of questions, but we're getting through them slowly here. Kevin Hamilton asks, there's a lot of fake stuff out there. How does a newbie Bigfoot researcher know or sift through stuff that has already been debunked long ago? I find that the toughest part for new people. Yeah, definitely.
I think that's a really great point. I get a lot of people that message me on social media, sending me videos that I already know are fake. You know, I've seen videos debunking them. A great resource I find is Thinker Thunker on YouTube. And he goes through all of the pretty well-known videos of Sasquatch, and he just dissects them, and he figures out whether they're real or not. And, you know, of course, we don't know 100% for sure, but he does a pretty good job of using science and geometry even to determine whether a video is real or fake. And what I've kind of learned over the years is, if you see a video of a Sasquatch, if you're able to see its legs, if its back leg is bending on that right angle, like you see in the Patterson-Gimlin film, I think that it's probably closer to being a legitimate video, because the anatomy of these creatures is much different than our own. And our feet just don't move the same way theirs do, which means our legs don't bend the same way theirs do. So when you see its trailing back leg at a right angle, usually that means that the anatomy is lining up to be a Sasquatch.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I kind of disagree a little bit on the Thinker Thunker thing. I think he's shown some poor judgment with stuff. I've watched some of his stuff, and I remember back in the day, I used to think it was pretty interesting, but I think he has made some mistakes in the past.
Yes,
and
I will agree with that.
Especially recently, there's been some stuff, and I know Pat and Squatch Talk and some of those guys, Steve Culls, I think, was involved at some point too, calling out, you know, some of the kind of stuff there with some machinery. But there's
the machinery. Yep.
Yeah, the what was it called? The Feller Buncher or something like that.
Yeah.
I think. But I think it's tough because there's so much out there, and there's so many new Bigfoot videos popping up, and, you know, majority of them, unfortunately, are usually fake, right? So it's tough because some people say certain videos are great, and then others will say, well, no, this is why this is not real. And maybe both people have, you know, very valid points, or they're very good at analyzing video, you know, and that's where it kind of gets tricky. But I think it's, you know, sometimes people, you know, maybe they get into the stuff and they want to see Bigfoot so bad that everything becomes a Bigfoot.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I worry about too, as well. As like, I don't want that to be like every sound you hear in the woods. That's why we try to be super kind of
right. Well, that, you know, you got to be careful, and you have to be skeptical. I mean, I would say also, like, if you came across a video and you weren't sure if it was real or not, send it to Alex or I. And if we've seen a video debunking it, we'll let you know. And if we don't know, then we'll just say, hey, I don't really know. I haven't seen anything on this.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's why a lot of people get frustrated in this topic, is the new people, you know, they come in and they're like, oh, look at this thing. And maybe we saw it debunked 10 years ago, and it's like, oh, this thing again, it's rearing its ugly head.
Right.
So yeah, it can be tough, but I think it's important, and just trying to figure out, is there a way to figure out if something is real or not? I mean, because sometimes maybe even in a debunking sense, there may be something that somebody's attempting to debunk when maybe they have a certain interest. I don't know. Like if it,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, because everyone, like a lot of people talk about like the Patterson Gimlin film, they'll say with certainty it's definitely been debunked. Oh, wasn't there the guy who admitted to being in the suit? There's been multiple people. So I think the problem too is that there's common misconceptions. So I
Yes.
worry about like when I see some stuff, like I think one of the things I had an issue too with Thinker Thunker specifically was he had that video, I think it was in Yellowstone, of like these cross country skiers that I think he was saying were
Oh
Bigfoot for a
yeah.
long time. And I think, and the problem is because I see that and people then assume that that is like Bigfoot, even though
Right.
it's like a security camera video. So there's some issues, and I'm not, people are obviously going to say, oh, what do you hate Thinker Thunker? No, I just think you need to look at critically and say, hey, somebody's made
Absolutely.
a lot of mistakes. Like, are they willing to fess up to it? Are they doing it because they maybe have an interest? Are they pushing a certain agenda or a narrative? They're just,
Right.
questions we have to ask and be skeptical of anyone pretending to, absolutely know the truth about something.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, the thing I do like about him is, he has taught me to look at the circumstance of the video. Are the people nervous? Are they purposely, shifting the camera around? I think like he's kind of taught me look for those kind of things because that'll maybe tell you whether the person is hoaxing or not. But like you said, we don't know all the details. Maybe somebody is being hoaxed by someone else and doesn't know it. So it's kind of tricky to analyze the videos. I think it's easy for people to make mistakes because I think bipedalism is something we have too. So it is a little bit difficult to determine whether something's a Sasquatch or not because we kind of walk similarly.
Yeah, and that's what gets confusing. Yeah, I think Rocket Reindeer here brings up he once thought cross country skiers were sneaky Sasquatches. I think that's the one I was talking about. It's
Yes.
like a security or a trail, not a trail camera, one of those live streams of like the gazers they have out there that explode, and there's like people skiing, and there's buffalo, and there's just a lot of weird kind of stuff that went on there. And I mean, it's
Hmm.
it can get a bit weird because again, like you said, it's so difficult with a lot of these things because these things would obviously be similar to us, and there's not really any other animal that has that level of bipedalism. Some primates do,
Right.
but gorilla walking on all fours or a chimp is very, very different. It's awkward. It's a lot more
Hmm.
awkward than say a human.
Hmm.
So absolutely. Now, all right, we've got a bunch more. I'm just trying to catch up. I know there's an interesting one. So this is from Breaking Bigfoot. So this is Breaking Bigfoot. Jesus, as I was saying earlier, had him on the show. He said, I actually have been just recently watching some Better Call Saul and saw him on there. He is Gonzo. He plays the guy who is the Tuco Salamanca security guard. So for any Breaking Bad / Better Call Saul fans, he is in that. But I just saw him recently in Better Call Saul. He asked, what are Emily's thoughts on the way Sasquatch react to female researchers or just in general as an advantage in her research? I've noticed a difference from my experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point. I would say I haven't really personally experienced anything that would make me think, oh my gosh, the Sasquatch is more interested in me because I'm female. Because I tend to go out with males. So I haven't really gone out by myself, and I don't think I ever will for safety reasons. But I think, you got to look at it this way. These things are either an ape or closely related to human, in my opinion. And I think they probably, I don't know if they necessarily have a mating season, but I mean, I'm sure that they are looking for a mate. So I think that if you go out as a woman and you're making vocalizations and you're calling out, who knows? Who's to say in their culture, these lone males don't walk around and listen for female vocalizations and go towards them? I mean, I think in a lot of ape species, you see the females kind of trying to, in a lot of animal species in general, you see females trying to win over the males. So if I were to go out and do a female vocalization and one of these things was nearby and all charged up, who knows? Maybe it would be more attracted and come over. I mean, I don't know if I'd want to find out what would happen next, but
Yeah, there's all those
I think,
stories of kidnappings with Native American women in history,
yeah.
at least.
And I don't doubt that that's a possibility because
Right.
you think about it, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens mated at some time. So I think it's probably possible. I don't know what kind of offspring you would get out of it, but that's why I don't go out alone because mostly I'm just afraid of humans
Yeah,
and the
people
danger
are.
from other humans. But I do think that there is a risk involved going out alone as a woman. So I think it can certainly be used as an advantage, but I think you should travel in packs.
Yeah, I agree too in general. I mean, even as a dude that I'm out there in the woods, it's always better to be with somebody
Yep.
else. I mean, there are times when you just got to get out in the woods alone, and I do that
Right.
just to kind of clear my mind. But people are obviously a threat, and I think just being prepared and taking care of your own person is very important out there. Personal responsibility, absolutely. Everyone is kind of their
Yeah.
own first responder, if you want to put it that way, especially out in the woods, especially out in these areas where animals sure are concerned, but humans are unfortunately, like, I'm sure you heard the story of when we ran into those Satanists in the in Mount Hood
That
Wilderness
was
and
so
in the
creepy. Oh my
Bigfooting area
God.
with Connor Anderson and Keith of the North American Bigfoot Center, and we were just like, they're taking us to this spot that had some cool history of sightings, and we're like, oh well, this is fun. So yeah, definitely an experience. But
I have encountered more crazy people in the woods than Bigfoot. So
yeah,
there you
right,
go.
right. Oh, I mean, no doubt, there's a lot of crazy people out there, unfortunately, and
Yeah.
Breaking Bigfoot follows up saying there's historical significance between Native American women encountering Bigfoot throughout Native history. Yeah, and that's something really interesting.
Yeah.
I'd love to, start a dialogue about that at some point and talk more about that, because like we said, you do hear those stories of
Yeah.
Natives being kidnapped in the past, and whether or not that was maybe a story that was used to scare people, stay away from that area, like kids of the boogeyman story. There's
Right.
a lot of these
Right.
Bigfoot stories around the country that seem to have been like a scary story to keep kids within eye shot, so they're not like running off into the woods, dangerous areas. But definitely
Yeah.
interesting.
I don't think that Bigfoot is necessarily scouting out, human women, but I would not put it past them if one of them is all,
Well, all it would take is one incident like that to happen, and then
right.
that maybe becomes ingrained part of a tribal history for hundreds and thousands of
Yes,
years. So
absolutely. I would not put it past them. I definitely think there's some truth to that. I do. Unfortunately, I do.
right. Now, Pablo says, Alex, if your research leads you near the Canadian-New Hampshire boundaries, I'm in Upper Coas, let me know. Definitely, that's cool. Yeah, I've been up there. The Wood Devil stories, man, I like that area. There's like nothing up there. There's just a lot of interesting stuff for sure. So yeah, shoot me an email, sasquatchoutoftheshadows@gmail.com. That's the email. Yeah, I think there's a contact on this channel. You can go check it out. AB asks, I would like to know what it is that really made Emily want to dedicate her life to Bigfoot.
I think it wasn't, it's not really just one thing. It's just a passion, it's something that's ingrained in me. The same way that people say, I want to be a firefighter and save lives, or, I want to be, it's just a passion. A lot of people have passions and they know what they want to do for the rest of their lives. And once I got into Bigfoot research, I thought to myself, I think it's the discovery that really draws me in. The fact that I have the potential to discover significant evidence, right? And I may never discover anything, but there is potential there for me as just some average person to go out in the field and discover something amazing. I think that is what really draws me into the subject, is we are all capable of studying this subject. A lot of careers, right? You have to get certain certifications. You have to have certain degrees. You have to have certain experience in order to be able to do the job properly. But in terms of Sasquatch, we can look at science. We can use some of those basics and those, the things that have been established, and we can use that to go out and conduct our own research. And who's to say, Alex, you're not going to go out in the field and try something completely new and have success? Anything is possible. And I think anyone in this field can make a difference. And that's what really draws me in and has made this my life passion. And of course, I have to make money. I have to have a full-time job. But every second that I have of free time, I spend researching Sasquatch, reading books on it, watching documentaries. It's just something within me that draws me to the subject.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would probably sympathize with that.
Yeah.
I certainly do. It's it's everyone would love to be out there doing it full time, and some people there very few times does that work. I mean, but I think the point is, if we could get to a point where the subject, somebody you had getting more individuals involved, people with academic backgrounds, people with tracking and hunting backgrounds, because you really, you need a mix of people, getting grants, that sort of stuff, get out there and actually find more conclusive evidence, especially on a more consistent basis. I mean, I think that's the goal ultimately. I mean, we all have fun along the way. Bigfooting is a lot of fun, meet a lot of cool people, and there's some social aspects they're awesome. There's no reason that you shouldn't enjoy that. And people that don't, like that, like, I'm sorry, but humans, we like to have fun. I don't think if you're having fun with it, if it's just a boring thing you're doing, Bigfoot research, you need to have take some pleasure in it. And
it's the world's greatest mystery. And honestly, it's like the world's last mystery,
We're running out of mysteries. There's
we
a lot
are.
of wild cryptids on the list, and I think a lot of them, unfortunately, are probably not real. But you've got the ocean and you've got these vast wilderness areas and reports of hairy ape men type things in man-beast anthropoids, as John Horrigan coined the term, out there running in the woods, and that's what people are reporting. So I don't know how people don't find it interesting, but then again, people have a lot of weird and other interests. So like you talk to some people and they're just not even fazed by it. I'm like, there's an 8-foot tall ape living in the woods. What are you talking about?
Exactly.
Whatever. They're lost, right? More for the rest
I think you have to be an animal lover too to appreciate Bigfoot, because whether it's human or it's closer to ape, I mean, we're all animals, and I think you have to be an animal lover.
Yeah, and you're connecting to nature, so you have to be into nature as well. I mean, a lot of the places that you go into, if you're not a fan of being out there, it's probably not going to be that fun dealing with the conditions and bugs and cold weather, warm weather, swamps, whatever, other animals. It's definitely quite a bit, but a lot of times it's camping with a purpose, and nothing wrong with that.
Exactly.
If you're doing it by the book and trying to document your research as best as you can scientifically, or with other just means of capturing what's going on in terms of like video and audio and that sort of stuff. But right on. So K2 asks, what would your current self tell your younger self about Bigfoot?
I would definitely say, I would say don't believe everything you read. A lot of people will write books on the subject, and you may read a book and say, oh, that sounds like a good theory. But when you research it further, you may change your theory. I used to think that Bigfoot was a Paranthropus species, and although that's a wonderful theory and has a lot of science behind it, I've been kind of researching a new theory on Australopithecus sediba, and I'm kind of more drawn to that now. So I would definitely say, like, don't necessarily adopt other people's theories just because it makes sense, because there may be other things that make sense too. And I think that origins in this subject, I know a lot of people will disagree with me, but I believe that studying their origins, their potential origins, is the most important element to this whole search, because I think that if we take their origins into consideration and we study how their ancestors may have behaved, it may kind of give us some direction in where and how we're going to find them. So I think it's important to just keep an open mind, always update your theories. Don't marry yourself to the first theory that you read about.
Yeah, and we talked about it earlier. It's perfectly fine to adjust your position in light of new evidence. In fact, you should. I mean, if you find new evidence that just because it kind of contradicts your worldview and you're just like, well, whatever, I'm just going to ignore that, you're kind of deceiving yourself. I think more than anybody else. I mean, you could be disappointing other people, I don't know, but you're probably just deceiving yourself for the most part. You're not being honest with that, and if you are able to adjust, it just shows that you do have the ability to move forward based off of new evidence. So right on. So we're gonna take a few more questions. We have a bunch here, but Greg Morrill, what is going on, dude? Another Canadian listener, Canadian friend up there. He says, Emily, I had the honor of having both Alex and yourself on Cryptocasters. Do you have a dream interview you'd like to do? If so, with whom? Yeah, nice question.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it was so much fun being on the show. And I would say a dream interview. I would love to interview Bob Gimlin. I have not been able to speak with him, but I would love to get his take on what happened. I would love for him to tell me, what he saw, what he thinks. I'm most interested in what he thinks the creature was thinking when he encountered it. So I would love to do an interview with him. I've been trying to reach out to him, but I haven't heard back. I'm sure he's a very busy man. So I hope to meet him one day and to ask him a few questions.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Yeah, that would be an interesting one for sure. I know Tate there in the comments, he's probably one of the lucky few that's interviewed him at the film site, like right at the Patterson Gimlin film site, which is pretty awesome.
And he had some great questions for Bob too.
Yeah, definitely. And I know he's got that interview up at the museum as well, the
Yep.
NABC. So Kevin Hamilton asks, does anyone ever find it weird that we can find footprints all the time, but we can never seem to track one of these things? If they leave footprints, we should be able to track it, right? Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I think there's been some examples of people tracking them. I know Titmus talked about tracking some back in the day. There's that one video in the Minnesota Canadian border where there's that really long trackway. I don't know if they didn't come to the end of it, seeing a Sasquatch, but I don't know.
and Paul Freeman, he followed tracks and he ended up filming them. So I don't know. I think it's tricky because these creatures are extremely agile. They know the environment way better than we do. It would be like if somebody broke into your house. You would know exactly where to hide. You could get away quickly. You navigate your house pretty quickly. Whereas if you were in an Airbnb or a hotel and somebody was breaking in, you may think to yourself, "Oh my God, where do I go?" And you may move slower because you're not used to all these things around you. So I think that these creatures, they call the forest home and they know what they're doing. I think it's easy for them to get away. I think a lot of the times when people find trackways that end suddenly, maybe they're just jumping into trees and kind of swinging their way through the forest. I don't know. I mean, they're pretty heavy, but I wouldn't put it past them. I think they definitely have the anatomy that can support both methods of transportation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, I know there's in Florida skunk ape stuff. There's some reports of them being in trees, and possibly younger ones. And I think an interesting point is, think about adult humans, right? People get heavy. We weigh more than a child. At what period of your life do you spend more time in trees as a kid? If you grow up in an area where you can climb trees.
Yeah.
As kids, it's a lot easier. We're a lot more agile. We can get and climb in the trees as adults. So maybe young Sasquatch are a little more nimble when it comes to being in trees. I don't know. I think that's sort of an interesting way to look at it, and that's just something that I've pondered as well. The trees, and there have been sightings of larger ones in trees, jumping out of trees or off of big branches. So interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Fruit Loops Film says, I'm currently painting a Squatch while listening. I often listen to stories while painting. It really makes it more interesting. That is super cool.
I love that.
I would love to see that. If you could send that, Fruit Loops,
Yeah.
Send it to social media. We got all kinds of links down in the comment below. You can send it to Emily and she'll send along. If you send it to me, I'll let her see it as well, because that's really cool. I mean, we're just here having fun talking, and
yeah, that's awesome. And expressing yourself creatively like that is so important for mental health and physical health and everything else. So
definitely. Yeah, lots of other comments coming in. It's hard to keep up with it all, but I think we'll take another question here from Jonathan. So this is a good one. Jonathan Dodd asks, what is Emily's top Bigfoot book to recommend?
I would say it's totally cliche, but it's a classic. Dr. Meldrum's book, Legend Meets Science. I know everyone will probably recommend this, but it really is the best resource. It has everything in there. It has the all the science and history behind this subject, and I think for a beginner it's an excellent read. It's a little bit difficult to understand, because he does use very scientific terms. However, there are diagrams, there's pictures. He does make it as easy as possible to understand. But I would say if you've been in the subject for a while, I highly recommend John Green's I think it's called Sasquatch Bigfoot.
Oh yeah,
I love that one, and it's really good. If you just Google John Green's books,
I know what you're talking about. I think it's a bit of a larger book.
It's a larger book. It's almost like a magazine.
That's what
size.
I was just going to say. That's the one I have. Yeah, it's like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and something else. It's a complicated title, but it's probably one of his most easy to access books nowadays, because some of the other stuff is harder to find or pricier.
Yep. And that has a lot of the iconic stories like Ape Canyon, the Osman story. I think that's really good. And then I would say if you've already read all the, pioneering books, I would say Bigfoot Terror in the Woods by W.J. Sheehan. Great series. You could buy any one of the books. He has like 20 volumes, and they're not continuous. They're just all kinds of stories that he puts into these books. He interviews people. He relays the story exactly how he hears it. And that's a good way to kind of learn about sightings and behavior, behavioral correlations.
Right on. Yeah. Kaiju here says The Apes Among Us is a good one too. Yeah, that's one of John Green's other books. Hey, we actually did a show about Bigfoot literature, Sasquatch books.
Oh.
3 or 4 shows ago with Carrick and Tate
Oh my
and
gosh, I want to listen
Jeremiah.
to that.
So if you guys are curious about that, go back a few episodes and you can check that out for listeners. They're maybe just tuning in now for the first time, or longtime listeners, go check that out because we talked about all sorts of books. My favorite book, and I've talked about a lot, is by John Bindernagel. It's his first book about the Sasquatch, the North American primate, or something along those lines. Because it reads like a wildlife guidebook. It's just like an Audubon guide or Peterson guidebook. It's so similar in the way that it's just straight to the facts and what we know and what we don't know, and it's just written in a very nice way. And like Sasquatch Legend Meets Science is awesome. And I've heard this from people who have sort of maybe academic or anthropology backgrounds. They can actually understand some of that language, because there is some language in there that Jeff, obviously as an academic, uses that's a little bit on the higher levels. So maybe for the lay person might not be the most easy thing to understand, but
right.
So it gives people an excuse to maybe go brush up on some terms they don't know about. Why not?
I did a lot of Googling when I read that book. But no shame in
yourself at the end of the day,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Scottish Wildman says, Emily, have you checked out Sasquatch archives on YouTube? Some great old interviews with Bob and many more. Yeah, they have some amazing stuff on there. I don't know who runs that YouTube channel. If somebody knows, post a comment. They post like all kinds of stuff. I think they're the ones who have that legendary interview or the video of it's called Renee DeHinden Blows a Gasket, where it's like Daniel Perez giving a presentation in Willow Creek about Patty and the possibility of it being fake. And Renee DeHinden just starts shouting at him and just goes on this whole. It's like a classic kind of.
I've got to see that
moment. I think that's on that channel. I mean, there's a bunch of channels that have that, but I do believe that is Sasquatch archives. Yeah,
I will definitely check that out.
It's just kind of posts of other old videos. So a lot of the old school stuff. So, knowing the history, I think, is part of it too. About the people that got into it first, whether it's the John Greens and the Renee DeHindens and the generations that came after them, Daniel Perez, and then obviously people that more folks would be familiar with, because there's so many generations now kind of going down the line.
Yeah.
Definitely interesting. What's going on, Nikki? We got Harry Man and Hoaxes and Hoodwinks in the chat as well. And lots of other folks. There's just a lot going on, a lot of conversations going on. I'm trying to keep it on. I appreciate the super chat, Peggy Curtis. And absolutely. So where was I had a question somewhere, but I lost it. But anyway, I think we'll start kind of wrapping it up as we go. But I did want to ask you I talked about earlier, comparing the sort of, I know we talked a little bit about it, but your biggest sort of comparison, I guess, between the East and the West Coast. Like you've been mostly in the New York area, and then you have that experience obviously in the Mount Hood area, which is just absolutely incredible. What other kind of differences did you note?
I definitely, like I said, out there you can go into the woods at any time of the day, any time of the night, and you are just free to roam. Whereas out here it's a little bit different. There's a lot more regulations and laws out here, I think, at least from my experience going out. So I think it's a little bit harder to access the really good spots out here. And that's something that I am working on recently. I'm trying to find some really remote locations that I'm going to be able to get to at night legally. And so I think that's like a big difference. And I would say the other thing is the brush is just so thick out there. You can't even see 10 feet in front of you. It's just so dense. Whereas out here, I think it's a little bit easier to see into the tree line. But honestly, I wouldn't say that there were tremendous differences that I noticed. A lot of it reminded me of places I had been in New York and Vermont and Massachusetts. It's very similar. They're just pine forests. Honestly, it reminded me a lot of Lake Placid, the Lake Placid area. Very similar. So I didn't notice too many differences. I would just say the culture of people out there is different because they all know Sasquatch as a household name, whereas out here people don't know as much about it.
Yeah, I'd say Whitehall is probably the closest you're going to get to that here in the Northeast, at least. I mean, they call it Bigfoot capital for a reason. I mean, you saw the turnout there at the Bigfoot, the Sasquatch
I'm not
Festival
able to. I don't know if it's my audio or yours, but I'm not able to hear you too well. You have like a robot voice.
Oh, what's going on? Can everybody hear me? If somebody can't hear me, just write in the comments.
It might just be me, unless it's everyone else.
Let's see. Yeti mic should be
working. Is anyone else saying something?
How about now? Is it any better? Still can't hear me?
Is it just me, or are other people noticing it too?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm getting through to folks right now. Lol, that proves that Alex is a robot. Can you guys hear me? People are saying they can hear me. They're saying Sasquatch messing with my electronics.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay. Hi, I can hear you
Oh,
both.
there we go. Now
Perfect.
I hear you.
Sounds
Okay.
okay here. Wow, that was weird. Glitch in the
That was
matrix? I don't
weird.
know.
Yeah. That was
That's weird. I
weird.
didn't do anything differently. I didn't change any audio settings or anything. Okay.
Weird.
Well, thank you guys. Everyone in the comments is saying, yeah, we can hear it loud and
Yeah,
clear.
Sasquatch is messing with our audio over here.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is, yeah, I don't know what's going on, but usually we haven't had too many tech difficulties lately, so that's kind of funky. May have been an internet issue, come to think of it.
Yeah, could be. It
Great.
could be me.
Yeah, everyone's letting us know it's all good. But anyway, so yeah, so kind of getting into what do you have for any future plans? I mean, what you're willing to share about, what do you have other projects planned? I know you said you made your kind of membership program sort of available to the public, and you have, is it like videos and stuff that you're doing on? It's videos. That's what at least I can see from the site.
Yeah, so my whole membership program was I started the membership because I wanted to be able to fund my expedition to Oregon and share, my findings with a small group of people, get their opinion. And it was so rewarding. I had so much fun getting to know each and every one of my members. But I decided that, my mission really is to educate people on this subject. And I wanted my information to be available for everyone. So I did release my membership content all on my website, which includes videos, exclusive data and maps that are made by my data analysts, and a ton of research articles. So something that I have planned for the future, I'm doing kind of mini series on my undiscovered page of videos. And my first mini series, season 1, was my expeditions in Oregon, which have evidence and recordings and audio that you can listen to. Really interesting stuff that I found out there. And then my next mini series is going to cover tree structures. This is something that is widely debated by a lot of researchers. Some researchers think that, this is not Sasquatch. It has nothing to do with Sasquatch. Other researchers swear by it. So what I'm doing is I'm traveling to locations that have no Sasquatch reports. And I'm going to be doing an analysis of what I find out there that's either man-made or nature-made. And I want to see how the animals and the weather are manipulating this area with no Sasquatch reports, kind of as a constant in my experiment, to see, what could be attributed to Sasquatch. And so I'll be bringing on some experts who have been studying tree structures for quite some time. Another one of my team members, Levi, is helping me with the project. So that's going to be season 2 of my little mini series. So you can look out for that on the Undiscovered page. It probably won't be out for a couple of months because I'm going to spend this winter period kind of looking into that. And I want to see if I find anything that looks like a footprint on the ground, in the snow that maybe is a rabbit or something like that. And I really want to find the defining line between what is man-made and what is Sasquatch, because I think a lot of people who come up with tree structures are, unknowingly contributing false data to this field. And I think it's really important that we settle it once and for all. What are humans capable of? What is Sasquatch capable of? Where's the difference? Where's the line that defines the two?
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's really, I mean, so what you're essentially doing is you're using an area that that there wouldn't be any possibility of Sasquatches being, and sort of like a control area.
Right.
Oh, that's like you're actually trying to put scientific practices at play in the field. And I think that's something that most people probably aren't doing or don't know how to do when it comes to this sort of stuff. So that's actually really cool. And yeah, that stick structure debate, I mean, it comes up time and time again. I mean, we all see the pictures, right? You just Google Bigfoot stick structures and you'll get a million different results. And some stuff is maybe more convincing than others. But, most of the stuff I've seen that seem to be stick structures are probably weather damage. I've seen people posting a lot of those primitive, shelters and stuff like that, like survivalist stuff. I used to make stuff like that all the time in the woods, and you leave it out in the woods. You go to a remote area purposely, so then somebody comes by and is like, oh, it must have been a Bigfoot. And I think you're
Yeah.
right. There's that false narrative kind of thing.
Yeah. But
And
then, there could also be something like the nesting sites, right? I mean, that could really be attributed to a Sasquatch. So I'm kind of looking into that and seeing, maybe what are the differences. And it may result in not knowing. It may be inconclusive, but I think it's worth a shot of, trying to figure out what could be a Sasquatch versus just nature made. So if anyone listening has any pictures of tree structures that they're
yeah,
willing to
definitely.
share with me, I mean, I would love to analyze them and kind of see if they line up with what I'm finding in this area with no Sasquatch. It's important to be able to analyze our own data and to kind of critique it as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can correct the record. It's
Yeah.
like there's a lot of this stuff that's assumed to be, and it's just one of these things that gets attributed to being Sasquatch, for whatever reason. Somebody said it once and it kind of became bona fide part of the research. So I think that's really interesting too. And it's happened with tracks before. I know Cliff has done some of that stuff. I've seen in the past, reading blogs and stuff from Cliff and Lauren Coleman and folks like that, talking about certain tracks that, were thought to be legit, that later on people find out that it was not legit. So you go back and you're correcting the record and you're taking out the
Yes.
faulty data, which is something that we kind of need to look at and need to do. So I really like the idea of that project. That sounds like something needed, and it's hotly contested. I mean, there's like this something like the nest, right? And they're not known to be Sasquatch. Like we can't say
Right.
that for sure yet. I mean, there's all the stuff that goes on, and whether it's the Olympic Project stuff or other reported nests, but
Mhm.
that seems to line up more with actual ape behavior that we know about, as opposed to maybe
Absolutely.
some of those structures. I mean, Kaiju Ninja brings up a good point. Says I think it's a combination of people, Bigfoot, and natural debris. It
I
could be
think
all
so
of the
too.
above. Could be all of
Yep.
the above. Absolutely.
That's what
Um,
I'm thinking.
and Breaking Bigfoot says I made a doc on tree structures on my channel. So yeah,
Oh,
so that
cool.
definitely a lot of stuff. And Maximus ends. Can I reread my question? Yeah, I'll take that question. I actually like that question. This is I saw this question pop in, but Maximus Eads, I don't know how to say that, says, what is your thoughts on a lot of non-confirmed Sasquatch experience tropes, i.e. rock throwing, etc., things we attribute to what we think it is? Could this be those lights we see in the woods? Interesting question.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think there's a lot that goes on that we really don't know for sure if it's attributed to Sasquatch. But when you do look back at historical records, there are people that have seen Sasquatch throwing a rock. I mean, even modern day reports, people see them doing this. And this is something that humans do. Like, this is something that apes do. Like, this is something that we see in other species. So I think
Yeah.
that it's probably a legitimate behavior. I think it is exaggerated in a lot of reports. I think some people may just have debris falling and maybe think it's a Sasquatch, but you hear these crazy reports where people are just walking down a trail and a rock comes jutting out of nowhere. While I was in Oregon, I did have an experience with some of the guys. We were out in a secret location in the middle of a meadow, and all of a sudden, within the tree line, we heard this huge branch kind of bounce off another tree. And the way that it bounced, I actually saw the branch. Nobody else saw it, but I was looking into the tree line, and it wasn't like totally dark yet, so I could see it. And it bounced sideways off of the tree. So I don't really think it would have been something falling, because it would have bounced down, but this
Right.
bounced sideways and off. So
Hmm.
I can't say for sure it was a Sasquatch, but I think that it's definitely a behavior they do to get people out of the area. In terms of the lights, I myself have experienced that. I saw a very strange light in Oregon while I was Bigfooting. Do I think that there's a correlation? Absolutely not. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think there's a correlation. I think that people do see lights in the woods. I think people see some really weird stuff in the woods, but I don't think it has anything to do with Sasquatch. I think it probably bothers them just as it does us.
Definitely interesting. Yeah, I think it's, when you're looking for a mystery in the woods and you have another weird thing happen, it's incredible. I mean, it's not incredible. It's probably easy to make the leap that, hey,
Right.
maybe this is associated with that. I've seen UFOs, and just strictly by the definition of the term unidentified flying object, it
Yep.
could have been secret government technology while
I
out
think
bigfooting or out in the woods, doing Bigfooty stuff, and then having that happen. And, you could make the leap, oh, it was Bigfoot. Like Bigfoot is connected with those things. unless you see one physically coming out of it, and which would be very hard to
Right.
believe. I think, it's something it's already crazy enough talking about Bigfoot and UFOs, but when you combine the two, I know a lot of people get very,
Exactly.
they don't like that. They get turned off by that idea. So
Yeah. And I mean, listen, I think, look, I believe in UFOs. I think there probably is other life out there. Um, I don't know exactly what they are. I don't know if they
right.
really are abducting people, but maybe if they are, they're also abducting Sasquatch. Who knows? They're probably also abducting deer and cows and foxes and birds, you know? So who the heck knows? If people are seeing them in the same area, I think that these creatures are probably just as disturbed by it as we are. I don't think that it's connected. But if it is connected in any way, then I would say they're probably just as connected to UFOs as we are.
What the heck is going on? Wondering what is going on. Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
They're probably like, what the heck? They probably think it's us. They probably think we're connected to them.
Little do they know, we have no idea. But yeah, but it's just funny because that topic has been very, I don't want to say mainstream, but it kind of has in the
It's
past few
widely
years.
debated.
Yeah, it's like it's not just the X-Files and pop culture anymore. It's very in the forefront, not in the forefront, but in these conversations that we're having with
Mm.
news media and even government officials and that sort of
Right.
stuff. So it's pretty intriguing.
Yeah.
Breaking Bigfoot, Jesus asks, where do we send the tree structure photos?
You could send them on my social media. On Instagram would be the best at the Forest Fleur, or Facebook, the Forest Fleur. You could just send it over social media, and I would love to incorporate it in my video.
So I guess and that's kind of getting to where people can keep in touch with you. Is that would probably be the easiest place to probably be your website to find links to all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. You could head to my website. I have some contact forms where you could email me, or social media at the Forest Fleur. You could totally send me a message. I answer all of my social media messages. I take the time each week to answer everybody. I have conversations with a lot of my followers about theories and ideas, and that's what this is all about. So feel free to message me. I will definitely answer.
Cool. This is a funny one. Smedley Do Right says, "Poor hairy man abducted by aliens. He must be scared." Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Think about the Bigfoots. What they're feeling about this. Probably not
Yeah,
cool.
it's true though.
That's
That's
funny.
funny.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been an awesome time for sure. I know there's been a ton of comments, lots of great people in the chat talking about lots of various topics. I think it was a fun
Awesome.
conversation, and really thank you for coming on, Emily.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always fun chatting with you, and I think you're an amazing researcher, and you always have great theories and fun things to contribute to the subject. So I'm always happy to talk to you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and you got a good head on your shoulders. I think what you're doing is great. I mean, you're just like with the website, it's giving people sort of a very easy, digestible place to start. Maybe that's a jumping off point for them wanting to look into other topics or
Right.
looking into certain elements of the bit. Like some people are not interested in maybe the wood knocking. Maybe they're really into footprints. Well, maybe they can go deep dive into that. So there's different places because everyone gets into it from a different sort of perspective or maybe different skill set they bring.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they have something to contribute. Maybe they're just
Yeah.
curious. So it's a good jumping off point. And obviously you have some great stuff on there too, and some useful stuff for people in the field, and just some really badass stuff like the beanies and all that other kind of cool stuff. So
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I definitely want it to be a place where people can go to just learn and hang out and learn about Bigfoot. So if anyone ever has theories or ideas, feel free to shoot me a message. Or if there's something you'd like to see on my website that's not already on there, I'm always open to suggestions.
absolutely. Kaiju Ninja, Bigfoot boxers.
All right, I'll think about it.
It's gonna be like a meme at this point.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you guys again, everyone in the comments and questions. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, for folks that are now tuning in, we'll be taking a little break for a few weeks. We got some stuff going on. You'll probably be seeing videos of that at some point here, but we will, we'll be talking about that. But we're not going to be doing this live show for a little bit. I need a little bit of a break too because we're going to be out doing some stuff. Jonathan Dodd here says just bought a beanie. Very cool.
Oh.
Awesome. Yeah, you won't be disappointed. It's pretty great. It's just really comfy to have out there when you're freezing and in the
Yeah,
woods
they're
and
really
doing
warm.
this kind of stuff. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks again, everybody. We will see you guys, I guess, in a few weeks with the live streams when they resume. Definitely got some cool guests somebody bringing on at some point. But until then, I will be doing some other live streams, so you'll see me popping on in random times. And again, we thank Emily for coming on, and go check her out at the Forest Fleur. And everyone have a great rest of your week, guys.